It looks particularly well fed.
Well, it's long. It doesn't look, you know, they're never fat.
Yeah.
Venomous snakes. They're so.
We're now streaming live on Facebook. So hi, everybody joining us on Facebook. I think we're still waiting a few minutes to let participants in who registered for the Zoom webinar. So we'll give it just another minute until I get the heads up that we're ready to go. But I'm so excited, Christy, that you could join us again. This
Me too. I've been really looking forward to this.
Good. I'm looking forward to making it out to Roswell to be able to check out the Nature Center in person.
You need to.
Yes.
Love to have you. I need to come visit the museum as well.
Yes, please do. I know we're still we're ready to start. All right, Christy, you ready?
Yeah, ready.
All right, great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this free family program. And as a reminder, a new program will air on the Columbus Museum's Facebook page every Monday at 2 p.m. throughout the summer. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into what we have planned for today. And I'm going to start with introductions. I'm Rachel Vogt, the Academic Programs Manager here at the Columbus Museum, and I am joined by Christy Hill from the Chattahoochee Nature Center in Roswell, Georgia. And a little later in the program, Christy is going to be joined by a special guest. We can't wait to introduce you to them. So together we'll be chatting about patterns in art and nature. And we'd love for this conversation to be collaborative. So if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and enter them into the chat box. I'll be monitoring the chat box throughout our conversation, and I'll do my best to get to everybody. We'll also have a few minutes at the end of the program if you have any additional questions as well. All right, guys, so to start off with, do any of our friends out there know what a pattern is? I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to just get that fixed in your mind, and then I'll tell you. So 10 seconds can feel like an eternity, but I promise it's not. All right, time's up. I have a little stopwatch going over here, so I make sure I don't cheat you. So a pattern is a design that is repeated, meaning we see it over and over again. And in art, artists use patterns to create visual interest. It gives us something to engage our eye, to make us want to look more closely, and to make us want to look longer. So let's go ahead and look at an art object together. Lucy is our producer today, and she's going to be taking care of our images. All right. So hopefully we'll get in a little bit closer. There we go. So on the screen, we see our first art object. This is a sculpture by an artist named Russell Vogt. The sculpture's name is Camilla, and Camilla is a camel. And if we look closely, we can also see that Camilla is a mosaic. And a mosaic is a picture or a pattern, right, created by arranging together small colored pieces of a hard material like tile or stone or glass. So let's look closely at Camilla, because I'm sure you can already start to see she is made up of a ton of different patterns. Right there in the middle, we've got this beautiful pattern made by red concentric circles. You can see that being outlined there by the mouse. And right next to it, we have another pattern made again by colors, but also by shapes. We've got these beautiful big black polka dots that are repeated on a white background. So again, colors made of pattern and shape. And if we follow that pattern down the leg, we've also got patterns made out of textures. If you could see that in person, you would see that each of those lines are raised. And then further down, that patterns of texture sort of being continued, but also then that pattern, and you're going to hear me say that word a lot today, being repeated in also shape, these lines that are repeated, and also colors. So we've got white, black, white, black, white, black, being repeated all the way down the leg. So we're going to be going through these images rather quickly today. If you want to look a little bit more closely, spend some time on Camella, I do want to remind you that all the objects we're going to be talking about today are available to view on our online collection. And if you're super interested, you can also visit our virtual museum for kids at columbusmuseum.com/virtual-museum, where you can download a Camella coloring page. All right, Lucy, thank you for that. Let's take another work. Excuse me, I'm getting a little tongue-tied today. Let's look at another work of art in the museum's collection. So this next image is a drawing by Tad Mike. And Mike, if you look closely, has created a pattern by overlapping the colors black and brown. And I don't know about you, Christy, but this pattern really reminds me of camouflage.
Yes, I love it. It looks so nature, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because many artists are inspired by nature and the patterns that they find in nature. One question that I get a lot in tours is talking about or asking about artist inspiration. So how can we tell what an artist is inspired by? That's kind of a tricky question, but sometimes an artist leaves us a clue in the title that they give their work. And you can see here on the screen, we've got the title next to the piece, Inwood Hill Park, New York City, March 21st, 2010. So Mike gives us two clues, a clue about when possibly this work was created, and also where or what specifically he was looking at. And I've never been to Inwood Hill Park in New York City, especially not in March. But when I look at this image and think of it in relation to a park, I often think of that mulch that you find underneath playground equipment, you know, the stuff that helps cushion your fall if you fall off the swing. So next time you're outside, I definitely encourage you to look closely, look at your surroundings. I bet you'll find a pattern or two that you might have otherwise missed. All right, guys, again, we're going through these pretty quickly because I want to get us to our special guest. But before Christy introduces them, I just want to share with you this last image. So this object that you see here, actually, before I give you the title, which you can already see on the screen, I want to give you a moment to decipher the pattern we see here. So again, I'm just going to give you a couple of seconds, and maybe Christy, at the end of the 10 seconds, you can tell us the pattern that you see. All right, Christy, what do you see?
Wow. I hate to give away what I see, Rachel, because I have another thought of something that I could show our audience that might make them compare these two things.
All right, let's
They
go ahead and
look a lot alike.
let's wait on that then. I can't wait to find out what you have to share with us. So if you had a couple things in mind, let's see if we came up with some of the same things. So we have a pattern created by shapes. I see these multiple diamonds being repeated and coming together. And I also see a pattern in color. The two most dominant colors that I see is this red and then also this kind of orange color. This object is titled Lone Star Quilt, and it was created by a woman named Angeline Pitts over 110 years ago. It's one of the things I really love about the museum's collection is that we get to preserve and take care of objects that would otherwise be lost to us, and we would lose those stories. So look again at this one. Look how these beautiful orange and red diamonds come together to create this radiating pattern of concentric circles. And then those come together again in an even bigger pattern to create this beautiful star. And like I said, this pattern is called the Lone Star pattern, but it has many different names depending on where the quilter is from. So often, if this was created in Texas, it would be called the Lone Star pattern because Texas is called the Lone Star State. If any of you have patterns on your beds, I wonder what stories they have to tell. I bet there's one. You should ask your parents. All right, guys, you have been so patient. So Christy, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to introduce our guest and also tell us what you think about that last image we saw.
So I'm also an equestrian, and I definitely feel like I lean toward the Western area a lot in the things that I think about. So I like the Lone Star anyway. It appeals to me a lot. And that star in the middle is a little bit lonely, don't you guys think? It's kind of, the name actually says something to you about how that pattern was created, and all of those diamonds are coming toward this beautiful star right in the middle too. But I think the star is the key, don't you?
I do.
So I have a friend that I brought today. Some of you know a little bit about our nature center, the Chattahoochee Nature Center in Roswell, Georgia. We're right by the Chattahoochee River. And we have a lot of animals that we work with. And one of the animals that we're licensed to rehabilitate here are native Georgia reptiles. So anywhere in Georgia, if you saw a reptile that needed help, we could actually help them. And so I'd like to introduce you guys to a friend. I'm gonna have to see if she wants to come out of her box. So I kind of don't usually have this animal just sitting with me when I'm sitting in on a Zoom meeting, but she was really happy to be invited to come today. And speaking of Texas, this animal actually came all the way from Texas, but she looks exactly like a Georgia resident. So I think you guys are kind of starting to see that this pattern reminds both Rachel and me a little bit of those colors in that quilt. What do you guys see? What colors do you notice here? I'm going to get her up really nice and close so you can see some hues. I know you all want to see her face, so she'll turn around here and look at you in a second. And she's giving that customary snake welcome of sticking her tongue out at you. So, how many of you guys have ever seen a snake in the wild? Well, apparently one of our members here at the Columbia Museum, Lucy behind the scenes, saw one this morning. And it was a little bit similar to this one. What kind of snake do y'all think this is? And do you notice that she has a whole different pattern on her belly right here that she's showing you? Very, very different from the back.
She's so gorgeous, Christy. And I just got word that Lucy was able to pop in that picture at the end of our presentation so we can share it with you all.
Excellent. So I know you're already saying this. A lot of you already know this. This is a corn snake. And we come up with that name from a lot of different reasons or sources, I think you might say. This snake is also in the rat snake family. And she is more called the red rat snake sometimes, but the corn snake is sort of in a class by itself. And this animal is a pretty large snake for Georgia. We typically have quite a few snakes in Georgia that you could see. about 48 different species now in Georgia, but this is one of the largest ones because corn snakes often get to be about 4.5 feet long if they live long enough. This snake has definitely lived long enough so far. She's
How
about
old is she?
18 years old this year.
Wow.
So most of our snakes, even as adults, look about the size of a pencil, honestly. And so I think we miss a lot of them. We don't see them because they're so small.
Mm-hmm.
So the rat snake family has a whole lot of cool snakes. And we're going to think a little bit about what makes them so special and maybe see some other snakes that you guys might have seen out there. So once again, she's doing that little tongue stick out thing here. I want you guys to think a little bit about what that means. What is she doing when she sticks out her tongue so often there? You can sort of see it against the background better. There she goes. And keep in mind that tongue is very long and it's forked. You hear that a lot. But what it means is she's got two different directions her tongue goes out in when she's smelling. And she can smell over here and over here to figure out what's going on. So she actually smells with her tongue. Snakes have a really cool organ in their head. It's called a Jacobson's organ. And it's right above their tongue, right above their mouth. And believe it or not, they stick out that forked tongue and it comes back in their head and goes into this little spot right above their mouth. And it tells them what it is they're smelling, what it is they're tasting in the air with their tongue. So their sense of smell and taste is all linked right there. Now, I know we can't see you right now, but I want everybody to try that just for a second. Stick out your tongue, feel the air. What do you taste? Try it. Huh? Well, let's think about this. If somebody was making chocolate chip cookies, could you smell that?
Mm-hmm.
So even with your tongue out. Or if somebody had some really awful smell, they were taking the garbage out and you happened to be standing by, you would notice that, right? Well, that's the kind of thing that snakes can pick up with their sense of smell. So one thing I think is so cool about rat snakes especially is they're such good climbers. If you've ever been walking in the woods, which is one of my favorite things to do, either walking or riding on a horse, and you look up and sometimes there's a snake in a tree looking back at you. And I actually saw a snake at the Nature Center last week that was coming back down the tree, a really big oak tree. And apparently that snake had been looking for something. Snakes have a hard life, you guys. They have to catch their food while it's still living and find a way to get it to stay still so they can eat it. So a lot of snakes have figured out, especially rat snakes, that they can climb a tree and look in a bird's nest to see if there's a handy little meal still in that nest. That's right, eggs in the nest. So it's not always our favorite thing to know that a snake has made off with our favorite songbird eggs, but they do have to eat as well, and that is one of their favorite foods. I bet that some of your viewers will have some questions, and I don't know if anybody has used our chat page quite yet, but
I do have a question for you, Christy.
Okay.
So thinking about snakes and camouflage specifically, because I started thinking about the image that we saw earlier, the Inwood Hill Park. And I'm just wondering what kind of environment you would find the corn snake. What is their pattern useful or is it just beautiful?
Well, it's both. I think for us it's beautiful. For the snake it's very useful. And in Georgia, we have the type of outdoor areas, a lot of pine trees that look a little more reddish brown in color. It actually not see a corn snake climbing a pine tree sometime because they tend to blend into the tones in the trees. The same with the leaves and the pine straw on the ground. Their color blends beautifully with all of our foliage around here. And of course, if you have taken a walk in the woods, you know how crunchy the leaves are. So this snake not only can smell you coming, but it can also feel your vibrations and all the sounds you make when you walk. So it would know if you were coming along, probably would hide. Sometimes they hide in plain sight, as you say, like camouflage, and sometimes they actually will take cover if they sense any danger nearby.
Great. That makes a lot of sense, thinking about the Georgia pines and also the red clay that I see everywhere.
Good thinking.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, we don't have any other questions yet. We still have a couple more minutes in our program. So if you guys are still ruminating on some of that information, please go ahead and add those questions in the chat box. But I know you have one more thing to share with us, Christy. I think some other snake patterns as well. So maybe it's a good time to go ahead and to jump into that now.
So let's think about patterns again, you guys. I know you've been studying the snake a little bit and you can see her beautiful pattern. Think about all the animals that you've ever seen and the ones that you think just had the most beautiful coloring or markings. Their patterns have a lot to do with their place of living. They have a whole lot to do with where they're going to feel safe. And honestly, in my opinion, if you think about zebras and giraffes and even dogs that have all kinds of different patterns, this group of animals to me has the most beautiful of all the skin patterns of anything out there in nature. And we can learn a whole lot from the way that they camouflage out there, but also the way they behave. Let's look a little bit at the images that we brought up in there. And I want to use this book that's one of my favorite ones. I get a lot of help from this Snakes of the Southeast book.
And while Lucy's bringing those images up for us, we do have another question from Facebook. One of our visitors asks, do the snakes have specific flavors they can taste? Ooh. Like how we can taste sweet or salty or sour?
I would say that they definitely could get very interested in yummy rat or mouse smell that's nearby in the forest where they live, maybe. And they can definitely take a warning from, say, an animal like a fox who has just been nearby and left a sign that they were there. Because lots of animals use smell to mark their territory, don't they?
That's true.
As far as yummy and things that smell really good, this snake would really, really love to smell a mouse or a rat. That would be their favorite smell, I think. You guys look at this book and see if you've ever seen a snake like this that's on the cover of the Snakes of the Southeast. Both of these are Georgia authors who do a whole lot of work in herpetology for UGA as well. Has anybody ever seen a snake like this one on the cover? Well, if you live in South Georgia, like the Columbus Museum where you guys are, you should be lucky enough to see a yellow rat snake sometime. Another cousin of this one in the rat snake family. And it's interesting that their pattern is so different, isn't it?
Yeah.
What does that pattern remind you of? It almost reminds me of a rope when I look at a yellow rat snake. Almost like the twining is all the scales there have intertwined, just like a hemp rope or something.
Or like tree bark. Maybe some of the patterns on bark.
These snakes can also just blend in really well with the trees in the South. It doesn't seem like they would until you see them in that setting. And we have a camouflage picture in our group that I'll show you too, that will be kind of a neat one to compare. So I wanted y'all to look again at this belly on this snake, just to get an idea what that reminds you of, if anything. And if you are in the chat, go ahead and tell us. If not, I'll ask that question again in a minute. So who's this snake right here? We have an eastern or a western ribbon snake. Does this snake remind you of a ribbon? Because I think most of our snakes were honestly named by people who thought of what it looked like to them when they were named, don't you? And it moves really fast, and it's sort of like when you pick up a ribbon and you flail it in the air. The pattern of this snake reminds me of streamers or ribbon.
Where would you find these ribbon snakes? They remind me of something you would see near the water.
I think they're more aquatic than a lot of the snakes that we're talking about. And they remind a lot of people of the garter snake that you do see a whole lot near water. And who's seen a garter snake in their garden? A ribbon snake, in my opinion, is not one you would see as often, but I just thought that pattern was beautiful. Very thin body. Look at the round eye in the ribbon snake, just like our corn snake. Non-venomous. You can tell that pretty easily to look at any of these snakes so far because of the shape of their eye and their patterns if you start to get to know them a little bit. So let's think about the difference in a non-venomous, and here we go, an eastern diamondback rattlesnake. That is probably the most beautiful pattern on earth, in my opinion. That is a snake to be revered and definitely to be respected from a distance. And I'd love to know if you've ever seen one of these before. They're not in my area of Georgia, but they would be in South Georgia.
Sorry to interrupt you, Christy, but I just want to remind our viewers that we've got about 3 minutes together with you here today. So if you have any final questions, now is the time to put them in the chat.
Thank you, Rachel. So the diamondback rattlesnake is a venomous snake, and it's one of our largest ones in Georgia. And they are the snakes who don't have to work quite as hard for their food because they can sort of hang out and wait. And not only do they have those wonderful snakes for smelling, but they have pits. They're called pit vipers because they can sense heat for up to 16 feet away. So if any little mammal should approach their area, all they have to do is reach out and make a grab and then kind of wait until that venom does its job. So this one we think of as constrictor. All of our non-venomous snakes in Georgia are mostly constrictors, which I know you guys know means that they wrap their body around their prey to hold it tight until it stops moving. So then they can swallow it.
We got another question from Facebook, kind of building off what you just said there, but people are wondering how dangerous rattlesnakes are.
Rattlesnakes are only dangerous if you get close enough for them to bite you. So a venom from a rattlesnake is definitely something you need to have treated immediately. The rattlesnakes their venom is more toxic than a copperhead. And I did want to get to our copperhead picture as well because so many people confuse this rat snake with this copperhead. And what do you guys see? Look at that pattern and really how different they are. They say that the copperhead with those snake eyes that you can only see from a distance the pattern is a Hershey's Kiss pattern. If you want to think about a snake and a Hershey's Kiss at the same time. but they do. They have these Hershey Kiss shapes coming down from the top. They're the only snake that have that kind of pattern that gets wider from that very narrow little part at the top and looks like the shape of a Hershey's Kiss. Some people call it a bow tie pattern. Heads are a lot wider and triangular shaped, whereas this horn snake head, you can kind of see how thin their heads are. You just can't always tell, guys, when you see a snake. And my main message here is, if you see a snake, be so happy and be excited, but don't try to engage with it. Don't feel like you have to try to pick it up or touch it. What would that do? The only thing that could come out of that would be a very bad thing was if you got a bite. And luckily, most of our snakes, if they bit you, you're not going to get really hurt. You're just going to not feel like it feels that good, right?
Yeah. That's a great message to, you know, just always be respecting nature and the creatures that live within it. And I think we're going to have to wrap up here. Christy, did you have any final? We had a couple more images. If you want to tell us quickly what we see on the screen here.
This is a Midland water snake. Almost every snake you see near the water is a water snake, and they're going to have a wider body like that. They all look a little bit more like venomous snakes to most people, but they're harmless except for they can eat prey. So all of these guys have a mouth. One other thing I wanted to tell you is the only reason we have this snake living with us in captivity is because it was hatched out as a pet snake, and a teacher had it for her class for quite a while, and she had the right permits to keep it in her class in Texas. She moved to Georgia and realized that it's against the law to own a corn snake in Georgia because they're protected animals, just like all of our non-venomous snakes in Georgia. So she turned it into us, and we're taking real good care of her, but we've only had her for about a year.
Great. Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you guys for all the work that you do over at the Chattahoochee Nature Center. I encourage you guys to go check out their site to learn more, as well as to check out the Columbus Museum online. Let's see, I think that's about it. We've run out of time, unfortunately. And if you have more questions, please go check out the Chattahoochee Nature Center online. I'm sure Christy would be more than happy to answer those questions for you.
Of course.
And as for us here at the Columbus Museum, we're so happy that you joined us. And please remember to tune in again next Monday on Facebook at 2 p.m. All right. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, special guest. We enjoyed having you.
She did too.
Good. All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.